Who do you think did kill the missionary?
Me.
What about your lady friends?
That was later.
Does Major Thomas know?
No. And he's not going to.
But we've always told the truth. Major Thomas has been pleading justifying circumstances, and now we're just lying.
We're lying! What about them? It's no bloody secret our graves were dug the day they arrested us at Fort Edward.
Yeah, but killing a missionary, Peter...
It's a new kind of war, George. It's a new war for a new century. I suppose this is the first time the enemy hasn't been in uniform. They're farmers. They're people from small towns. And they shoot at us from houses and from paddocks. Some of them are women, some of them are children, and some of them are missionaries.
Lieutenant Morant.
That's the voice of the great British actor Edward Woodward from one of the finest films ever to examine the realities of war, Breaker Morant. And on tonight's edition of Take Two, a special tribute to the late, great Edward Woodward. We'll take a look at the Take Two mailbag and perhaps take your phone calls if time allows. Across the aisle from me, it's my very good friend. It's the Walking Film Encyclopedia. It's Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, the undeniable czar of film on the Central Coast, King Vidor Award winning, you know who I'm talking about, your friend, my friend, the one, the only Jim Dee. And Jimmy, that's a great clip from, I think, you know, it's interesting. A lot of times people say, well, what's your favorite movie? Well, that's impossible to say.
Yes.
But this would probably be, depending on my mood at the moment, anywhere in the top 5 to the top 10, Breaker Morant, of the greatest films ever made. And Edward Woodward, the late Edward Woodward, is fantastic in this film.
You know, Bob, I noticed not that Edward Woodward would make a big headline about his passing, but when I saw that he passed away in mid-November, in fact, we should just give the basic statistics about Edward Woodward. He was born June 1st, 1930 in Surrey, England, and he died November 16th, 2009 in Cornwall, England. And I was really, as soon as I heard of his death, Bob, I immediately thought of two films that we're going to discuss this first half hour of the program that Edward Woodward made so special, and that is the clip that we just heard from Breaker Morant, and then probably one of the creepiest, even borderline disturbing films I've ever seen, the original Wicker Man with Edward Woodward and the great Christopher Lee. But we return to the biography of Edward Woodward. In fact, when I realized that he had passed away, I was thinking of his film work and hadn't really seen much of him on the big screen. And the reason for that is he wasn't really in that many movies. And researching his life, he really was in a ton of television shows. And we're not talking about so much what he perhaps is most indelible mark in this country as the Equalizer. And prior to perhaps his appearance in both The Wicker Man and Breaker Morant, in dozens and dozens of British television shows, even going back to the early 60s. He also cut his teeth, of course, early on. If you see Edward Woodward, classically trained actor, did a lot of Shakespeare in his early years, a lot of stage work, and I think in these two performances that we're going to be spotlighting tonight, you can see that come through. He is an amazing, powerful actor, and you can always see that classical training.
Absolutely, Jimmy. He's very magnetic, and he's got a very powerful presence. And in both Breaker Morant and The Wicker Man, I don't think anybody can quite portray indignation. In the case of Breaker Morant, when he's up against a stacked deck in the courtroom, quite like Edward Woodward, or Equally fascinating is how he portrays the perplexed, virgin, deeply Catholic police officer who's up against what may or may not be a murder on an island off the coast of Scotland. And the odd twist here is that the island is inhabited by, what can we say, people who are kind of a druid cult or something. And he's having a very difficult time getting any help from any of the people, even though they're all very friendly to him, but he can't seem to make any headway. And he has his moments where he kind of loses it, and he does it in such an extraordinary fashion. I mean, what a wonderful actor he was. And I think it's worth noting that he's worked for many, many, many years, but his film work is very small. These are really the only two leads I can remember that he ever had, and he was absolutely amazing in both of these films. Yeah, he had small parts in Beckett and Young Winston and a few other films. Mr. Johnson come to mind, The Final Option, but for some reason he was never in a lot of films. It'll always puzzle me because he's just a wonderful presence.
He's also a great singer. In fact, in much of his credits here, which 95 appearances, those include his film appearances, but just some of the titles. I mean, I'm just going to, and Bob, I should ask you if there's any video evidence or any video of some of these United Kingdom television shows. I mean, The Saint, perhaps he's on The Saint, Sword of Honor, Theater 625, The Armchair Theater, 30-Minute Theater, The Baron, Mystery and Imagination. I mean, none of these titles are ringing any bells, and I assume he seemed to be a staple on British television. And it'd be interesting to go back and try to find some of these little gems and see what kind of work he was doing. Just such a fascinating actor. To give you an idea of his biography, he was trained in acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. His debut on stage in 1946 was in a play called Where There's a Will, and he went on to actually debut on Broadway in the early 60s, so he actually made it over to these shores and was on the stage. But really an amazing, powerful actor. And then it seems like in his most visible time was during The Equalizer here in the 1980s in America. But he went on to, even after that, did a number of different acting jobs. And, again, we look into his career after he has died, and it's just like, okay, it's a handful of films, and we see this humongous career on television, stage, and on the silver screen.
Well, what's interesting about this, Jimmy, and I think it's fair to note that in Britain, they have their own TV stars, their own TV shows. Through PBS and whatnot, we get a lot of them, but we don't get all of them. And clearly Edward Woodward's work, I remember when I was over there in the late 60s, he had a TV show called Callan about a kind of burnt-out British spy, which was very good. And it's never seen the light of day here in the States. And I would say people who liked Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Looking Glass War, or maybe Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Sailor, or Smiley's People would really love this show. And there's nothing.
Boy.
Just nothing here at all. And that's a shame. It really is. But rather than lamenting what we will not get to see, I'm glad that we have what we have, Jimmy. Breaker Morant and the original Wicker Man alone put Edward Woodward in the exalted Take-Two Hall of Fame by themselves?
Well, just by the fact that we can talk of this first half hour about two films, again, you talk about Breaker Morant being in your top 5, top 10. We usually team up this film. I think we did a show on great companion pieces, and probably the film that is linked most to Breaker Morant is Paths of Glory. There are similar elements in both. It's sort of the inner workings, the machinations of war, the rules, and the, well, not going by the rules of war. And what I find interesting in Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory, it seems that the three soldiers who are essentially, sacrificed due to a general's blunder, there would be more of a connection to Breaker Morant if it was the Kirk Douglas character in Paths of Glory, who was an officer, he's a major, I believe. Mm-hmm. And if he was taken to task, I think if he pushed a little harder in Paths of Glory, that would have happened. When we talk about Breaker Morant, we're talking about similar territory, although it's a little bit stronger in the fact that Morant, who is portrayed by the great Edward Woodward, is an officer, and he is being taken down as, the scapegoat, as the reason why things aren't going quite well. But what is also incredible about this film, and you know it, Bob, is just those adherence to the rules, how the rules just break down in the battlefield. Also, we have the friction between the Australians and the British. That's also apparent here. But what I think is the most poignant as we talk about the great Edward Woodward is he was willing to portray this character, warts and all. He's a hero, but he's also a broken man. He's been through the war. He's seen some of the most horrible atrocities. And he's also trying to get used to a new type of warfare, which is explained in this film. It's guerrilla warfare, where you don't know who the enemy is. It's the Boer War that is depicted in Breaker Morant.
And he's a bit of a hothead,
yes.
Impetuous. He's pretty ferocious in combat. He doesn't mince, he doesn't wait around. He'll just charge. He gets his blood up. And he doesn't deny that he kills prisoners. In fact, the one prisoner who shot, we'll play a clip from that in a minute, but the one who killed, well, see, notice the slip with murder. This is kind of the subtext of this film, too. And this was also mentioned in great films like Paths of Glory and Apocalypse Now. How do you charge people with murder during war? War is murder. And as you pointed out, Jimmy, the Boer War was the first of the modern guerrilla wars, counterinsurgencies. One side wears uniforms and is identifiable and held accountable because they're an army from a country. They fly a flag, they march in formation, all that jazz. And on the other side, it's a farmer who's giving you milk during the morning and eggs, and then at night he's trying to kill you. And the parallels, especially the Boer War, which started at the end of the 19th century and ended early in the 20th century, the parallels to the war in Vietnam, Algeria, you name it, up to and including maybe Iraq and Afghanistan, the parallels are quite evident. And that's what I think makes this film so good. It's so well written. Bruce Beresford directed it. Fantastic. I mean, this is just one of the great films because the message is timeless. And because Edward Woodward is just so good in this film. I mean, he is the embodiment of that time. He's very much a man of his time, a poet. He sings songs. He marries he's going to marry his best friend's sister. He's very much a Victorian chap in so many ways. Yet, because he's kind of a poet warrior, like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now, in the classic sense, he's also aware of the hypocrisy of it all. And being such, it doesn't stop him from acting cold-bloodedly. In fact, he sees it as an excuse to go do it. And he's not afraid to lie to protect himself and his friends, which I think makes this film far better. If he was too virtuous, this film would not work. And Edward Woodward, with his skill as an artist, is able to work that line extremely effectively here.
Very effectively. Let's listen to another clip from Breaker Morant. And, we failed to mention as well, Bob, the fact that at the core of Breaker Morant is a rousing courtroom drama. And I think what we have come to learn, the great courtroom dramas really translate to great cinema. And boy, at the very core of this film, Breaker Morant, Jack Thompson is the lawyer defending Breaker and his two buddies in the Army. And the courtroom drama just really is the centerpiece of this film, a rousing courtroom drama. So here's another clip from Breaker Morant, and this is in the thick of the courtroom drama.
Good job.
Lieutenant Morant, Captain Hunt was a particular friend of yours.
Yes. I was engaged to his sister in England.
So his death was very disturbing to you?
Well, it was more the way he died. He was mutilated.
You were present at the action where Captain Hunt was killed?
No?
Well, then how do you know he wasn't killed in a fair fight?
Because I saw his body.
Sometime later, you can't possibly know how Captain Hunt met his death. So you cannot produce any evidence to connect Visser with it. So then, why did you order him to be shot?
It is customary during a war to kill as many of the enemy as possible.
And was your court at the trial of Visser constituted in any way like this? What rule did you shoot him under?
Like this? Oh, no, sir, no, it wasn't quite like this. No, sir, it wasn't quite so handsome. And as for rules, we didn't carry military manuals around with us. We were out on the veldt, fighting the Boer, the way he fought us. I'll tell you what rule we applied, sir. We applied Rule 303. We caught them, and we shot them under Rule 303.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, I always get a charge out of hearing that.
Edward Woodward from Breaker Morant, and from that great court trial, which is, again, the centerpiece of the film. And again, just dissecting the realities of war, and you're out there doing something under a so-called rule, which may be taking another person's life or holding them as prisoner or not holding them as prisoner. Again, if you are ever searching for a movie where you want to get some emotional power and really dissecting the inner workings of war, and done so with a great moral conscience, check out Breaker Morant, directed by Bruce Beresford. And the whole ensemble. Edward Woodward is great, but there's Brian Brown, Jack Thompson as the incredible lawyer. And revisit this film, folks. If you haven't seen it in a while, check it out again and just realize what a great actor Edward Woodward was. Now, Bob, we go from one of the best films about war to, as I mentioned before, one of the creepiest, getting under your skin kind of movies. And, I put this on the level, we're talking about The Wicker Man, and we're talking about the original Wicker Man, which I hate to say that I'm not even going to bother with the remake with Nick Cage. But, why remake such a great film? But this film really, I would say, deserves an R or an NC-17, because it gets into, we see stuff on the screen with the occult or with satanic sort of things, or as you're saying, sort of a druid, hedonistic cult. But there's something about the creepiness of this film that is on the level of, say, Rosemary's Baby, to where to me, it really got under my skin. In this film, Edward Woodward is sort of the moral grounding. He's the one who is, like you said, a good Catholic policeman who is investigating the disappearance of a young girl, finds himself in this place where, well, he couldn't be more out of place, right?
Absolutely. And what makes the original so good, Jim, is that the film begins with him landing in the seaplane. on this island. And we, the audience, are landing on the island with him. And we're as perplexed as he is by what he's encountering. Here we have friendly people, somewhat eccentric people. You don't necessarily feel threatened by them, but at the same token, they're answering your questions with a smile, and they're warm, but they're not telling you the truth. And you feel frustrated and perplexed. And that's what I really enjoy about this film, is that his journey and our journey are one and the same. And he's our engine into this really strange, peculiar subculture, if you will, that's isolated on an island, and they live according to their own rules. And then you get a sense, as his frustration unfolds in trying to discover the whereabouts of this missing girl, we learn a little bit about him, about his faith, about, I think it's the infamous scene where he's trying to sleep and in the inn, and the innkeeper's daughter, portrayed by Britt Eklund, is trying to seduce him. She's on the other side of his bedroom wall, singing a song with no clothes on, and definitely trying to seduce him using some kind of mystical, sensual power. And you're watching Woodward on one side of the wall, it's Britt Eklund letting it all hang out. And on the other side is poor Edward Woodward in his devout state, just literally coming to pieces up against this sensuous tsunami, for want of a better word, and he doesn't know how to cope with it. It's interesting because at that point the film then starts to take a turn, because now we're starting to get a sense of who these nice people are, is that they have different ideas about life.
They have their own religion, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Here's a clip from the original Wicker Man, and this is kind of dovetailing off what Bob said about the disorientation of the policeman, Edward Woodward, as he comes to the island. And this is when he comes to the island, and you can kind of tell they're kind of playing with him. This is from the original Wicker Man.
Good day to you, sir. I'm the harbour master.
Sergeant Howie, West Highland Police.
A missing child is always trouble.
Aye. For everybody.
Perhaps you would be good enough to explain matters to his lordship. He's most particular who lands here.
All in good time. We too have our own particularities. You know her. Her name is Rowan Morrison.
No, I've never seen her before.
I don't know the face either. You know her, Kenny?
She doesn't belong to this island.
No, I never saw her before. No, she doesn't belong here at all, Johnny. Do you? Yeah.
No, can you say no? Now, what are you saying? You're saying that she is not from the island?
That's right, she's not from here.
No, you get Morrison's and Lewis and a few in Mull. I would try there.
Thanks. None of us has seen May Morrison's daughter, Rowan, since last year. She's only 12 and she's been missing from her home for many months. The mother's name is May Morrison.
Oh, May! She quite slipped my memory. Of course we've got May. She keeps the post office in the High Street.
May Morrison, you're quite sure?
Quite sure.
Well, thank you for your help.
That's not May's daughter, though.
No, she's not May's.
Then who is she?
Yeah, that's from the Wicker Man. Edward Woodward they're messing with him, as you can hear. He's in search of a missing girl, and here the first leg off the boat, he's really being given a bill of goods here. So it just sort of sets the tone for what he is going to encounter in The Wicker Man. And he's so good in it. Again, I think with the way we're bringing up both this and Breaking Around about Edward Woodward, he is so good in both films.
He really is, Jimmy, and the fact is that both of these films stand the test of time so well. I mean, one's 36 years old and one's 30 years old, and yet they play so well. And there's so much of the credit has got to go to this wonderful actor, Edward Woodward.
Let's hear one more clip from The Wicker Man. Again, this is Edward Woodward as the investigating police officer trying to find the missing girl. This is from The Wicker Man.
You're liars. You are despicable little liars. Rowan Morrison is a schoolmate of yours, isn't she? And that is her desk, isn't it? Well, isn't it?
I think you ought to know.
And you are the biggest liar of all. I warn you, one more lie out of you, and I will charge you with obstruction. And believe me, Miss Rose, that is a promise. Now, for the last time, where is Rowan Morrison?
I would like to speak to you outside, Sergeant. Girls, get on with your reading. It's the Rites and Rituals of May Day, Chapter 5. I won't be long.
Well?
You don't understand, Sergeant. Nobody was lying. I told you plainly, if Rowan Morrison existed, we would know of her.
You mean she doesn't exist? She's dead?
You would say so.
Oh, come on. She's either dead or she's not dead.
Here, we do not use the word. We believe that when the human life is over, the soul returns to trees, to air, to fire, to water, to animals. So that Rowan Morrison has simply returned to the life forces in another form.
You mean to say that you teach the children this stuff?
Yes, I told you. It is what we believe.
You never learn anything of Christianity.
Only as a comparative religion. The children find it far easier to picture reincarnation than resurrection. Those rotting bodies are a great stumbling block for the childish imagination.
Why, of course. And may I ask, where is the rotting body of Rowan Morrison?
Why, where you'd expect it to be, in the earth.
You mean in the churchyard?
In a manner of speaking.
No, in plain speaking.
The building attached to the ground in which the body lies is no longer used for Christian worship. So whether it is still a churchyard is debatable. But forgive me, I must get back to my girls. Good morning to you.
That's from The Wicker Man, an amazing, scary, very creepy film, and that was the, well, shall we say, the frustrated Edward Woodward as the policeman in that great film. And that goes back to 1973, Breaking Around, done in 1980. The most visible Edward Woodward here beyond those movies was in his television show The Equalizer, and Bob, he was in 87 episodes between 1985 and 1989. What I think is kind of remarkable is after The Equalizer, Edward Woodward went on to star in many different television shows, and he was working right up to his death this year in 2009. Some of the British television shows he was involved in Suspicious Circumstances, 39 episodes, Common as Muck, 12 episodes. I'd love to see some of these. There was a television version of La Femme Nikita. He starred in that. His last television show was something called The East Enders. He was in 6 episodes in 2009. And our tribute, our Take Two hat off to great actor Edward Woodward, who passed away on November 16th, 2009. We'll miss him, but we do have his great work that we can see whenever we want.
Absolutely,
Except I want to see
Jimmy.
some of this British TV.
Me too.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, you're listening to Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio, KCBX, Central Coast Public Radio. We are going to hit the Take Two mailbag in a little while, but we're going to take a break, head over to the concession stand, refill our popcorn and drinks. Back with more in a moment. You're listening to Take Two on Public Radio, KCBX and KCBX HD1 San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara, and KNBX San Ardo. We're streaming worldwide at kcbx.org. You can write to the program at movies@kcbx.org and check out the Take Two program archives at kcbx.org. And you can also catch us at npr.org.
Take Two is sponsored by the 2010 San Luis Obispo International Film Festival, running March 12th through the 21st. Complete information available at slowfilmfest.org.
Support for KCBX comes from the Cupé Winery Tasting Room, open daily in Los Olivos, featuring the wines of Cupé, Verdad, and Ethan, sourced primarily from organic and biodynamic grapes. More at QUPE.com. We're back on Take Two, the movie program. My name is Jim Dee. I'm here with my good friend Bob Whiteford, and splitting up the program today with our tribute to Edward Woodward. And now we want to emphasize that you can write to us. It's movies at kcbx.org. When we did our show a few weeks ago talking about distribution of movies, we got a good flurry of letters. In fact, we do have another letter we're going to share with you tonight. But do give us a letter if you've enjoyed tonight's program, if you have ideas for future programs, if you saw a movie that you'd like to tell us about, or that you hated or loved, or anything, movies at kcbx.org. Well, Bob, I think it's time to hit the Take Two mailbag.
I like it. Let her rip.
Time for the Take Two mailbag. We just like the music. We just play the music. You know, Bob, we did have another response to the idea of movies being available on your cable TV the same day that it's available in the movie theaters. The article that we were going off on a few weeks ago had to do with the Motion Picture Association of America wanting to make available to you that first-run film at your movie theater. Well, you don't need to leave home. You can beam it in on your TV set. And, sort of the outcome of this, we're saying that if they could do it without the movie theater, well, they would, you know. But we had a really good response. And before we get to our letter in our mailbag segment tonight, we do have a rundown of a number of the films that have been playing, the latter part of 2009. And, Bob, maybe we're all full of it in the fact that there's a number of films that are very well attended in the movie theaters. And, as our letter writer will say, perhaps that movie-going experience, seeing a movie with an audience is the way to be, even though we'll get to that in a minute. I would like to just say that, of course, the New Moon, the Twilight Saga, here's a film that cost $50 million to make. Obviously, it lit a fire under many moviegoers. It's made over $255 million. And Sandra Bullock, who was in a lot of movies that kind of just did okay, but she really paid her with The Blind Side, and that's a $29 million budgeted movie. It's already at $128 million. It's the number one film in the first week of December, and should continue to do very well, I would think, at least for a few more weeks. Some other big ones, people went to see 2012. I don't know if they're going to continue to see it, but that raked in about $150 million. And a handful of other films that seem to be bringing people into the theaters. The remake of Brothers, the Danish original that we really loved, did quite well, brought in about $9 million its opening weekend. Jim Carrey's Christmas Carol doing quite well, bringing in over $100 million. Let's see what else. Fantastic Mr. Fox, the Wes Anderson film with stop-motion animation, doing okay. That's getting great reviews. But what I'm trying to get to here is the fact that perhaps our ideas that the movie theater is fading maybe doesn't seem to be the case. We're in sort of the season of movies, and people are going out.
Maybe we're a little premature in our assessment.
Well, I hope we were. Well, back to the mailbag, we do have our letter. This is from Robert, a listener, and says, Dear Jim and Bob, a frequent listener to Take Two. I have a delayed reaction comment on your previous observations, philosophizing, kvetching. That was me because I own a movie theater, right? About the future of the movie experience. It certainly is obvious that video on demand is driven by Hollywood greed and will probably be successful in its own right and will negatively impact moviegoing in theaters. But at the risk of being too detached, I might offer a longer historical view of the overall future of movies. Live theater has been around for more than 2,500 years, offering immediate, often spontaneous, changeable performances, and which may survive another 2,500 years. Viewing movies in theaters has been around only a little more than 100 years, and this is not only a relatively new experience, it may not in fact, fit best in the real strengths of movies. A movie is obviously a fixed offering, an unchanging yet very flexible or fanciful result of a complex collaboration of talents not seen in live theater. The movie theater experience is, of course, enhanced by the large screen and responsive audience, but movies have more to offer than close-ups, action sequences, exterior shots, and adaptability to theaters and large screens. Movies allow us to re-experience the same production performance, to savor favorite scenes over and over again, to freeze or slow-mo special parts, to analyze the qualities of a shot, a camera angle, a special effect, a gesture, a facial expression, an actor's remark. And, Robert notes, these can only be done by most of us on a home theater. Home viewing is also now possible on a high-definition large screen, sitting in a comfortable chair, unbothered by talking, moving, eating neighbors. The home viewing experience can be an individual or shared one, usually shared with compatible family or friends. Usually. And the movie can be paused when nature or any emergency calls and resumed when the time is right. And we have the access to movies not available in local theaters. So perhaps the theater movie experience is not destined to survive, not only a result of industry greed, but also the special qualities of movies and the enhancement or realization of these qualities by the expanding home viewing experience. The ultimate demise of movie theaters may not be inevitable and may not occur in our lifetimes, but if it occurs, movies will certainly survive and perhaps be even better. That's from our listener, Robert, and kind of going back and forth, I think he really believes that seeing a movie in a movie theater, the way I believe movies were intended to be seen, is the best situation, and seeing it with a great audience and on the big screen is the way to go. When I read this letter, Bob, the thought occurred to me that he talks about movies being somewhat static, but the great movies that survive, and let's talk about Breaker Morant, what we just talked about this show. I was knocked out by this film when I first saw it back in the 1980s, saw it again, and it had another impact on me. And as in other words, the movies are static, but I'm changing. Seeing Citizen Kane at a certain time of your life has a certain impact. You see it another time in your life, and it has a different impact. It's sort of the way art works, and the fact that the way you sort of interact with it, the way you are in some certain time of your life is it changes. So I like Robert's ideas that, great movies. If you have them on your home theater, you can rewind, you can examine them, like you can't do in a movie theater. On the other hand, I do believe that experience of seeing it on the big screen is the best experience, and we change even though these movies seem to be set in stone.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, Jimmy. The other day I was watching Marlon Brando in One-Eyed Jacks. Not a great Western, but an interesting Western. And there's a scene late in the film where Carl Malden horsewhips Marlon Brando in the middle of town because Marlon Brando went out with Carl Malden's daughter and she came home, the next morning. I think we can figure out what Marlon was up to. And he had just shot Timothy Carey in a bar fight, which was fantastic, I might add. And I kept going back. Keep going back. I'm replaying it because there's something about that scene that I always liked. This time, because like you say, Jimmy, it's like we're always different. We're changing, and we go back to what we like. And what makes movies great as opposed to mediocre is you go back, and even though you're changing, is the nature of human beings to change, you go back to an old film and you see something new you didn't see before.
Yes.
And even though this isn't the greatest film ever made, it had great actors in it. And this time I was really looking at Carl Malden when he was whipping Brando. And, I mean, another alumni of the Actors Studio. And it was really interesting just watching him. Because Brando was actually directing him during the making of this film, believe it or not. It's a long story, but to bring it all home, I very much enjoyed the ability to go back and look and study and deconstruct a scene. That was fine. It got me what I needed. The sad thing was, when it was all over with, I wanted to see this scene played out on a big screen.
Yeah.
It was shot for a big screen. The film was shot in VistaVision. It's a Paramount release. And that's where it just wasn't quite enough for me. I'd rather have just sat in the theater and watch it go down in real time, but, with the original CinemaScope print of it, VistaVision print. So I'm kind of... it's like, as the movie-going experience goes, it's like, okay, I'm watching a lot of stuff at home, but you cannot replace that. You just can't. I mean, how many times had I seen The Great Escape on television in pan and scan? And then finally got to see it in a theater years later in its original aspect ratio, and holy cow, it was like I'd never seen it before at all. Totally different experience.
I remember The Manchurian Candidate. I've seen it many, many times. I saw it on the big screen when I was 11, I think, when it first came out, and it had a major impact on me. But seeing it on video since then, after Frank Sinatra, let it out of the bag. But then there was the San Luis Obispo International Film Festival had a 35 millimeter print of Manchurian Candidate. And I thought, okay, well, I've seen this movie a ton of times, so I'll just watch it. And it was a different experience, Bob. I just said, this film is actually knocking me out a heck of a lot more than watching it on the small screen. So, it's interesting, Robert's letter. And, Robert, we thank you for your letter, definitely. Yes, Bob.
I have to... I saw The Manchurian Candidate. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because my buddy JJ and I went and saw The Manchurian Candidate when it was reissued to theaters at the Rainbow about 21, 22 years ago. And even though in the course of my time, even before the video store, I owned a copy of it on video, and then I've still got a copy on DVD. And I like to go back and watch that film from time to time because it's wonderful. John Frankenheimer, I mean, we should do a show on him. He's one of the great filmmakers. But I have to be honest, nothing. And I saw JJ over Thanksgiving, so we were talking about this. Nothing. It still was never as good as when we saw it in the theater that time. I mean, it was just something about Henry Silva dressed up as a Korean, and Frank comes knocking on the door and just punches him in the face before the guy even says hello. Was just, I mean, on the big screen, it was out of sight.
You know, maybe I'm thinking of the response, if obviously there's older films that aren't available in the movie theaters, as Robert notes, and the fact that you do see it for the first time on video. But I would have to say that if you do have a chance to see, if there's a revival of an older film, and you have a favorite, it doesn't happen too often, of course. Or maybe you go to the big cities. I was in San Francisco over the weekend with my wife, and I was looking at the schedule for the Castro Cinema. It's all classic films, and here's if you're up in San Francisco and you have a chance to see a classic film on the big screen, truly it is worth going out of your way, instead of saying to yourself, boy, I've seen that so many times on video, what's the deal of seeing it on the big screen? Truly, folks, it's a different experience, and I'd like to think if you do have the chance to see it on the big screen first, that's the way to see it. Then you can go back to your video, where you can sit in your comfortable chair, as Robert notes, and play the scenes over and over, and really check it out.
Jimmy, I'm glad you brought up the Castro, because when I lived up in San Francisco many years ago, they had such wonderful films there. I saw, for the first time, really, I saw Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. The first time I ever saw the movie was on the big screen.
Yay.
And it blew my mind, because it's filmed for the big screen. And, it's a dark comedy, and, the chicks are kind of hot, tourist Satana and all that, but the visual aspects of that film were amazing. I mean, Russ Meyer was a photographer. He really knew how to fill a frame. And I'm not just talking about, cup size, if you get my drift. I mean, he really knew how to photograph a film. And the black and white cinematography was mind-blowingly good. I mean, when we left after that, me and my friends, and went out somewhere and had some drinks and talked about the movie, was like, I was just blown away by the way it looked. I mean, I loved the camp, I loved the sense of humor, I dug the film. Anybody who listens to the show knows that my sensibilities, but the visual impact of that was so profound. It just can't give you that depth. And believe me, I have a copy at home. I've worn the grooves out on it. I love that movie.
We can't put our finger what it is about the movie theater, and perhaps it is the reality of film. There's a depth there that doesn't come across on a video screen, and we're not really, size is important, as we know, but there's something else going on with 35 millimeter film being projected on a big screen. You're essentially alone in the dark, but you do have an audience around you. I mean, that's another bit of magic. You're in there with all these people. You're surrounded by other members of the audience, and yet the lights go down, and you're together with a lot of people, but you're also alone in the dark, alone with that movie. But there's also, there's a silent camaraderie, something about an audience where you're amongst people, but still you are enjoying that film solo.
Well, Jimmy, on that note, one of the best movie-going experiences I ever had was at the Castro, and it was for The Magnificent Seven. And there's a scene. I had seen the movie many times, through the wonders of television, but this was the first time I saw it in its original aspect ratio, and it's a big movie. And there's one scene where the Mexican bandits are fleeing the town, and Eli Wallach is a Mexican bandit. For one, I think is inspired typecasting. I mean that in a funny way. But he was actually very good in it. But when they're riding out of town, or maybe they're riding into town. In fact, they were riding into town. Eli Wallach was a New York trained actor. He never rode a horse in his life. I think the closest he ever came to a horse in his life was, going to see the Belmont Stakes. And what was funny is you could tell that the horse had been whacked in the rump, and he's holding on to the reins. I don't know how he's not falling over, and he's holding this like a tipperello in one hand, and a tipperello is kind of a cousin of like Clint Eastwood's skinny cigarello that he made so popular in his Euro westerns. And he's holding that, and he's holding the reins so daintily. I cracked up. It's like I had never seen this before, and it was wonderful. It's like, he can't ride, but we got to shoot this scene, so someone's, puts a burr under the horse's saddle because he's got to ride, and he's just kind of flopping around on the saddle. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's in CinemaScope. You can't miss it. And then right after that, when the scene where they come up and they challenge, they're going, who are these gringos? And as far as an audience experience, say what you will about the boys of the Castro, they know how to watch a movie. Yul Brynner walks over slow, and I mean, in the CinemaScope, it's like he's got such control as an actor. It's like he's even controlling the shift of his cheeks in his blue jeans.
That are very tight.
And in CinemaScope, it's huge. I mean, you really get a sense of his majesty as he doesn't stroll up to the bandits. He's majestically, slowly, intimidatingly swaggers over to them. And his butt's moving back and forth. And you can tell because his guns are moving with him. And everybody started howling and laughing. It was great. And it didn't diminish from the film. It wasn't demeaning toward the film. I think everybody, myself included, we never really saw that before because you couldn't see it. Mm-hmm. It was, if it was pan and scanned, it was probably cut off. You probably got the middle of his back, so you never got the whole scene. And this is the way John Sturges wanted it to be seen. He wanted him to be a little over the top and the thing is, because he was kind of flamboyant with this, I remembered a story about the film. It had everything to do with him bumping heads with Steve McQueen, because McQueen hated stuff like that. And in that movie, he would just be using his white noise, adjusting his hat, fiddling around with his hat while Yul Brynner's talking, and you're not paying any attention to Yul Brynner. You're just looking at McQueen. I mean, he has very few lines in the film, believe it or not, but you're always seeing him. And this was Yul's answer. He kind of became, the King and I again, and it's great.
It really is, and just, again, weighing the video experience, even if you have that high definition flat screen TV that Robert talks about, where you can see these beautifully, in your home, at your home theater. I think, the word I was just trying to search for, Bob, is ownership. You do own that film. You can pop it into your DVD player, maybe play it on the Blu-ray. It looks absolutely fabulous on your TV. You own that. You can zip through it. You can look at the scenes over and over again. You don't own the theater experience unless you own the theater, let's just say. In other words, there is an experience there that you can't hold in the palm of your hand. It is much more cerebral in the fact that theater experience, you experience the film on a different level. You didn't take it home with you. You just experience it in this place with people surrounding you in the dark. And that is sort of like, I like to say that, I like to hope that moviegoers know that they're two different experiences. And I think, owning that movie that you love and revisiting it as you may, as many times as you want, fabulous. And again, maybe you see more and more. But I'd like to think that in answer to Robert's letter, both are, I think he weighs them out, even though he seems to weigh a little bit more towards the home theater. Mm-hmm. But I think they're both valid. And as he mentioned, live theater's been around for 2,500 years, movie going in the movie theater around for 100 years. The home theater experience is, what, about 25, 30 years old?
Maybe.
And hopefully they're both enduring, and the fact they both have validity in enjoying this art form. But let's face it, folks, you know, the movie theater is the place to see the movie on a certain level. You can also enjoy it on another level at your home theater.
Well, you know, Jimmy, just on that note, the last time I watched Magnificent Seven on DVD at home, which wasn't that long ago, that's usually in heavy rotation. Every time I see that movie, I think of that night in the theater.
Yeah.
And how much I was laughing so hard. It was like tears of joy. It was 500 other film lovers that were seeing this all almost for the first time, and it was a thing of joy for everybody. And I still see that every time I look at the movie or I pick up the DVD case, I think of that night, and I'll never forget it.
I think Yul Brynner does that again in Westworld, doesn't he?
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. I just haven't seen that on the big screen.
There's one you got to look for. Well, want to thank Robert for his letter, and again, write to us. It's movies@kcbx.org. The weeks to come, we're going to put on our Cinema Santa hats, maybe in the next week or two, give you some ideas for that film lover in your life for the holiday season. We'll also be working on some new programs for you. And again, if you have some ideas for shows, it's movies@kcbx.org. Want to thank Hank, our projectionist extraordinaire tonight, and we want to thank you for listening.
Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week, hopefully, with a scintillating episode of Take Two. Take care.
Morena,